Welcome back to the deep dive. I hope you have some time to really focus today. Maybe you are on a long drive or just sitting somewhere quiet. Because today, we are not just scratching the surface.
No, we are definitely not.
We are drilling down to the absolute bedrock of modern society. We are looking at a stack of research that is, frankly, well, it's explosive. It challenges basically everything you were taught in school, the things you see in media, and probably the things your parents told you about how life and relationships work.
That is no exaggeration at all. The material we are covering today is high voltage. It is the kind of analysis that usually gets whispered in private channels because the mainstream algorithm and polite society, for that matter, absolutely hates it.
Exactly. And because of that, I have a very specific job to do before we even dip a single toe into these waters. If you value this kind of unfiltered forensic analysis, if you want us to keep bringing you the topics that others are too scared to touch, you need to hit that like and subscribe button right now.
Yeah, please do. Seriously, take a second. Do it right now. We need your support to keep the signal strong against the noise.
We really do. The content we are unpacking today pushes back against a massive cultural tide, and we need every ally we can get to keep doing this.
We do. So we are doing a forensic deep dive into a new ebook that is making serious waves in the manosphere and men's rights communities. It is called Uninsurable Marriage, No-Fault Punishment, Inversion of Property Rights, and Ideological Female Supremacy.
Quite a title.
It is written by Conrad Riker, and look, I am going to be upfront with you. If what we talk about today resonates with you, if you feel like you are the one holding the bag in a game you didn't even realize was rigged, you need to go to Amazon Kindle or Google Play Books and buy this copy right now. The author positions this not just as a book, but really as a manual for survival. It really is structured exactly that way. It reads less like your standard social critique and more like a tactical guide. Or perhaps an actuary's report on a failing system. It is dense, it is rigorous, and for anyone who wants to stay updated on his daily intel, the source material urges you to follow the author at Conrad Riker P. That's all one word on Substack.
Okay, let us unpack this.
Yeah.
Because when I first read the title, Uninsurable Marriage, okay, maybe this is about prenup law or family court logistics, but this is a forensic autopsy of the entire institution of marriage.
He is not pulling any punches.
No, he is not. Riker calls marriage an actuarial death sentence and a financial suicide pact.
Yeah.
That's a heavy hook.
It is heavy, but you have to look at who he is writing for here. This is tailored for the red-pilled man, the men's rights activist, or really any man who is looking at the modern landscape of relationships and feeling like the math just does not add up. The central premise he lays out is that marriage, as it exists legally today in the Anglosphere, is a contract that no rational actor would sign if they actually read the fine print.
Right. It is the idea that we have been sold a fairy tale, but the legal reality is actually a horror story. And the mission of our deep dive today is to really trace that argument objectively. We want to understand the history Riker lays out, specifically how he claims institutions were captured by feminists and Marxists, and then apply this cold, hard, actuarial logic to relationships.
Exactly. Now, to be clear for everyone listening, we are diving into his arguments exactly as they are presented on the page. We're not here to endorse this ideological framework or take sides, but to forensically examine what he is claiming. We are moving from the emotional sphere to the actuarial sphere to understand his perspective.
Yes, impartial reporting of the text. We're going to look at his risk assessment, the economics of what he calls the tax donkey, and finally his blueprint for a digital exodus and the sovereign individual. It is a massive amount of ground to cover, so we should probably start with the contract itself.
Let us do it. Section 1 of his work is titled The Actuarial Guillotine.
I love that title because it sounds so brutally final.
It does. Riker compares marriage to a business deal, but a uniquely terrible one. He calls it the iron contract.
So what is the bait and switch he is talking about here?
Well, think about literally any other contract you sign in your life. A mortgage, a car lease, a business merger. The terms are laid out, they're fixed, and both parties are legally bound by them. If you lease a car, the dealership cannot just show up 3 months later and say, actually, the price has tripled and we are taking the tires back, but you still have to pay the monthly lease.
But it would be highly illegal. It would be blatant fraud.
Exactly. But Riker argues that marriage is a bait and switch because it is a contract where one party, essentially the state acting through the wife, can unilaterally change the terms after you have already signed the paperwork.
And this is where the no-fault divorce concept comes in, right? Because growing up, you hear the term no fault and it sounds I don't know, civilized to like, oh, nobody's to blame, we just grew apart. It sounds like a progressive way to avoid nasty drama in the courts.
That is the branding. That is the marketing pitch that sold the legislation back in the 1970s. But the book argues the reality is a legal trap. Riker says no fault effectively translates to all fault on the man in terms of the actual financial consequences.
How so?
Think back to the business merger analogy. If one partner decides to walk away because they are simply dissatisfied or bored, there are usually severe financial penalties for breaching that agreement. You cannot just dissolve a corporate partnership because you found a better business partner next door without making your current partner whole.
But in marriage, you can.
Precisely. Riker points out that a woman can dissolve the union for any reason: boredom, finding someone new, simply falling out of love, or what he refers to as a hypergamous impulse, and the state will still enforce the transfer of assets from the husband to her. The person breaking the contract is rewarded, and the person trying to uphold the contract is penalized. It is a breach of contract where the breacher gets the payout.
He uses this concept of net present value, or NPV, to illustrate this. Now, for the listener who maybe skipped Accounting 101 or fell asleep during that lecture, can we break down what NPV actually means in this specific context?
Sure, net present value is a core concept in finance and investment. It is used to calculate the current value of a future stream of payments or heavy risks. If you are an investor looking at a project, say building a new factory, you calculate the NPV. You look at the upfront costs, the potential future profits, and the statistical risks. If the number is positive, you make money. If it is negative, you lose money.
Makes sense.
Riker says if you ran a net present value calculation on a modern marriage license in a no-fault jurisdiction, the number would flash bright red.
Just because of the liabilities involved.
Yes. He argues that when you factor in the statistical probability of divorce, which hovers around 50% generally, but he specifically notes is initiated by women 70 to 80% of the time, plus the projected alimony payments, the asset liquidation costs, the legal fees, and the massive child support liabilities. He says the business deal of marriage is mathematically insane.
A guaranteed loss proposition.
Right. From his perspective, if a corporate business deal had this kind of risk profile, the risk assessment team at any bank would scream at you to run away. They would literally call it fiduciary negligence to sign it.
And yet men line up to sign it every single weekend. We rent the tuxedos, we book the expensive venues, we invite all our friends and family to watch us sign it. Riker attributes that to deep social conditioning.
Yeah.
But legally, he brings up a really fascinating point about the concept of void ab initio.
Void ab initio. It is a Latin legal term meaning void from the beginning.
Meaning the contract basically never happened.
Close. It means the contract was never legally valid to begin with. In standard contract law, if a contract is signed under duress, or if one side holds all the power and the other side acts without full information, meaning there was fraud or the deliberate concealment of risk, the contract is supposed to be void.
Okay.
Riker argues that because men are not told the true statistical risks of divorce up front, what he calls the actuarial death sentence, and because the state creates a situation where the terms can be fundamentally altered against the man's will by the legislature at any given time, the marriage contract should technically be considered void ab initio.
So his claim is that it is a fundamentally fraudulent contract.
Yes. He argues it is a rigged game from the very start because the terms and conditions are hidden and highly mutable. You are essentially signing a blank check over to the state, and the state can fill in whatever astronomical number it wants 10 years down the line.
He also takes a massive swing at the engagement ring, the diamond industrial complex. I've always thought diamonds were a bit of a scam, with the De Beers marketing history, but he frames it specifically as a reverse dowry.
He views it as a barrier to entry. Historically, a dowry was brought by the bride's family to contribute to the new household economy. It was seed capital to start the business of the family. Riker argues the modern diamond ring flips this entirely.
Right.
It is a wealth transfer from the productive male to the decorative sphere before the contract even legally starts. He sees it as a test of compliance. By spending 3 months of your salary on a rock that is virtually zero resale value, you are signaling your willingness to participate in a system that extracts your resources. You are paying a premium just to enter a contract that immediately puts you at a legal disadvantage.
Extracts resources.
Yes.
That is a recurring theme throughout this entire book. He talks about the captain and crew analogy. This one really stuck with me because it feels so nautical, but it makes total structural sense. If you're the captain of a ship, you're ultimately responsible if it sinks right.
Correct. Maritime law, and historically family law, understood that authority and responsibility must always be linked. If the captain is liable for the ship's survival, he must have the unquestioned authority to command the crew. You simply cannot have responsibility without authority. That is a guaranteed recipe for disaster.
It is a basic management principle, too. You
Correct.
cannot hold a middle manager responsible for a team's output if he is not actually allowed to tell the team what to do or fire anybody.
Exactly. Riker argues that modern marriage has severed this link entirely. The husband is still expected to be the captain in terms of pure responsibility. He is expected to provide, to protect, to essentially go down with the ship financially. If the family goes broke, society views it as his failure. If there is an intruder in the house at 2 a.m., he has to go face it.
But he has zero authority over the crew.
None. Riker says the crew, meaning the wife in this analogy, can mutiny, scuttle the hull, demand the captain walk the plank, and then use the power of the state to demand the captain keep paying her a salary while he actively drowns in the ocean.
That is a dark image.
He calls it a structural failure of epic proportions. It violates the basic laws of human governance. If the crew decides to stop working or actively sabotages the mission, the captain should theoretically be able to dissolve the contract without penalty. But currently, the captain pays for the crew's mutiny.
It is a bleak perspective. But Riker claims this is not an accident at all. This is not just some well-intentioned legal oversight that got out of hand. This brings us directly to Section 2, the capture of institutions. He calls it the institutional rot, and he traces this back to a major historical shift from class war to sex war. How exactly does he claim we got from workers of the world unite to men are toxic?
This is Riker's detailed analysis of the Marxist pivot. It is a very specific historical argument. He posits that traditional economic Marxism completely failed in the West. Why? Because the working class, primarily the white male proletariat at the time, actually had it pretty good. They did not want to violently revolt against the bourgeoisie. They wanted to become the bourgeoisie.
They wanted to buy Ford pickups and houses in the suburbs. They wanted the classic American dream.
Essentially, yes. They were far too prosperous to be radicalized. So the cultural Marxists, the academics and social theorists in the mid-20th century, specifically the Frankfurt School types, realized the working class would never be their revolutionary army. They needed a brand new oppressed class to destabilize the capitalist system. They could not use class anymore, so they pivoted directly to identity. And specifically, they pivoted to sex.
So instead of the bourgeoisie versus the proletariat, the grand struggle became man versus woman.
Precisely. Riker describes this as the long march through the institutions. He argues this new ideology systematically conquered education, law, medicine, and specifically corporate human resources. The revolutionary goals shifted from economic socialism to cultural socialism. And the key ideological weapon here, according to the book, is the subtle distinction between justice and equity.
I hear those two terms used interchangeably basically every day. Major companies all have DEI departments now, diversity, equity, and inclusion. But Riker says they are actually opposites.
He does say that. He leans heavily on the Thomistic definition of justice, which comes from St. Thomas Aquinas. Justice, in that classical sense, is giving each his due. It is strictly meritocratic. If you work hard, take personal risks, and build a house with your own hands, that house is yours. That is justice. If you are lazy, take no risks, and build absolutely nothing, you have nothing. That is also justice.
Okay, so that is the historical baseline. What is equity in his view?
Equity, in the modern corporate and state sense that Riker is critiquing, is about enforced equality of outcome. It looks at the man with the house and the man without the house, and regardless of their choices, it says this discrepancy is unfair. So it takes half the house from the builder and hands it to the non-builder.
Which he defines as theft.
He calls equity theft wrapped in a velvet robe. He views it as a total moral inversion. You actively punish the typically the men who build and earn, to subsidize the non-productive.
And this feeds directly into his livestock analogy. It is a highly provocative claim, but he says men are viewed by the modern state essentially as tax cattle.
He uses the specific term tax donkeys.
Right. Tax donkeys. That was the phrase that really made me stop and just stare at the page for a minute. It is profoundly dehumanizing, but he uses it very intentionally to make a point about sheer utility.
It is visceral on purpose. The tax donkey is the beast of burden. The state desperately relies on the tax donkey to physically pull the cart forward. And that cart is weighed down with social programs, welfare, public sector salaries, and the entire divorce industry. If the donkey ever stops pulling, the whole system collapses overnight.
So the system has to keep him pulling.
Yes. The system is intricately designed to keep the donkey locked in the harness. It uses public shaming, constant legal threats, and immense social pressure to ensure the donkey keeps his head down and keeps working.
And this is why he argues the sunk cost fallacy is so dangerous for men right now. I know a lot of guys who think, well, if we just organize and vote for the right conservative politicians, or if we just lobby to reform the family courts, we can eventually fix this mess. Rager says, nope, do not even bother.
He says that is a complete waste of your finite time and energy. He argues the system is not broken at all. It is functioning exactly as it was designed to function. It is designed from the ground up to extract resources from men to fund the state and its various dependents. Trying to reform it, in his view, is like trying to convince a career butcher to suddenly become a vegan activist. It goes entirely against his core interests. The sunk cost fallacy just keeps men emotionally and financially invested in a system that fundamentally hates them, just hoping it will magically get better one day. Riker's advice: stop voting harder. Start checking out completely.
Well, let's look at the actual math behind that extraction, because Section 3 focuses heavily on the economic reality. Riker claims there is a massive hidden imbalance in who actually pays to keep civilization running.
This is what he calls the fiscal autopsy. Riker cites demographic data claiming that men are the only true net lifetime taxpayers in society.
Wait, the only ones?
According to his analysis, yes. When you rigorously account for all the taxes paid into the system versus all the government services consumed over a lifetime welfare, heavily subsidized healthcare, Social Security, public sector job creation, men put significantly more money in than they take out. Women, as a broad demographic group, are net consumers of those tax dollars.
So his argument is that the modern state is essentially just a giant automated mechanism for transferring wealth from men to women.
That is his explicit central argument. He views the state as a surrogate husband. Women effectively marry the state, and the state then taxes men by force to provide for them. And this leads to a very controversial political implication he proposes: no representation without taxation.
Like the old Revolutionary War slogan.
Exactly, but applied entirely literally to modern voting rights. He argues that if you are a net consumer of tax dollars, you simply should not get a vote on how those dollars are spent. He believes the current democratic system is just democratic parasitism, where politicians effortlessly buy the female vote by constantly promising to loot the male paycheck.
That is radical.
Yeah.
I mean, that would fundamentally change the political map of the entire world overnight. But he backs up this perspective with this fascinating idea of the hazard gap. We hear about the wage gap constantly in the media, the idea that women earn 80 cents on the dollar for the exact same work. Riker says we are totally ignoring the death gap.
The death parity, yes. He points out the statistical reality that men account for roughly 92% of all workplace fatalities. We are talking about the guys out on the deep sea oil rigs, the high voltage line workers, the deep sea welders, loggers, commercial fishers, heavy construction.
The dangerous stuff.
These are the incredibly dangerous jobs that actually keep the lights on, the internet running, and the physical buildings standing upright.
Right. You never see anyone campaigning for equal gender representation in the municipal sewer maintenance industry or the crushed by a falling tree demographic.
Exactly. Riker argues that civilization literally runs on male expendability. Men consistently sacrifice their physical bodies and their lives to build and maintain the raw infrastructure. And the mainstream feminist narrative is completely silent on this reality. They aggressively demand CEO parity, they want the air-conditioned corner offices and the comfortable boardroom seats, but they are perfectly happy to leave the dangerous, dirty, lethal jobs entirely to men.
So when activists talk about the wage gap, Riker says that is actually what? A fabricated lie.
He aggressively calls it the theft narrative. His assertion is that when you actually control for hours worked, physical danger, career choice, and willingness to travel or relocate, the wage gap completely evaporates. It does not exist.
Because men are choosing different parameters.
Right. Men earn more in aggregate because they simply work more hours, and they willingly work in much more dangerous or unpleasant conditions. He uses a great example of a male surgeon who grinds out 80 hours a week under life or death stress versus a female part-time librarian who works in a very safe, low-stress environment. To forcefully use the state apparatus to make the surgeon subsidize the librarian's lifestyle is not equity in his eyes. It is state-sanctioned theft.
It is essentially penalizing the guy for taking on the stress and the immense risk. It is punishing his success. Okay, so that is the broad economic backdrop he paints. Now let us get into the actual machinery that enforces this on a daily basis. Section 4 is called the legal machinery. This is where the book gets deep into the weeds of the divorce industry. I had honestly never heard of Title 4BD before reading this source material. What exactly is it?
Title 4D is a specific section of the Federal Social Security Act. Riker describes it as the primary fuel source for the entire divorce machine. Essentially, the federal government provides direct matching funds to individual states for every single dollar of child support they manage to collect.
Wait, pause. So the state actually makes a profit by collecting child support from fathers.
Correct. It creates a massive financial incentive for the state to maximize child support orders across the board. Riker argues this effectively places a literal bounty on the heads of fathers. The state has a vested financial interest in breaking up intact families and ensuring the father is ordered to pay the absolute maximum amount possible because the state gets a lucrative kickback from the feds. It turns the human father into nothing more than a revenue stream for the state bureaucracy.
But that puts the family court judge in a massive conflict of interest, doesn't it? Because if the judge reduces the child support to a reasonable level, the state itself gets less federal grant money.
Exactly. It perfectly aligns the state's financial interest with the mother's financial interest in extracting maximum payment, completely ignoring the father's actual ability to live or feed himself.
That perfectly explains the imputed income horror stories he outlines. Can you explain that concept to the listeners? Because when I read that chapter, it sounded completely insane to me.
It is arguably one of the most draconian tools wielded in family court today. Let us say a man loses his job due to a recession, or his entire industry collapses, or maybe he just burns out. Say he has been working 80 hours a week for a decade, he is having heart palpitations, his blood pressure is through the roof, so he decides to take a lower stress job that pays $50,000 a year instead of his old salary of $150,000.
Which is a completely reasonable life choice for human health.
In the real world, yes. In family court, absolutely not. The judge can look at this man and say, well, you could theoretically be earning $150,000 because you have the advanced degree in the work history. You are voluntarily underemployed. So the judge formally imputes that higher income to him.
I mean, what?
He officially orders the man to pay his monthly child support based on the $150,000 salary that he does not currently have, rather than the $50,000 salary he actually earns.
So he is paying child support on phantom money that does not exist.
Yes. And since he obviously cannot pay it, he quickly falls into massive arrears. Then the state suspends his driver's license. Then his professional licenses are suspended, so he cannot even work if he wanted to. And finally, he gets thrown in the county jail. It is modern debtor's prison. Riker calls this literal indentured servitude. It legally forces the man to keep working at absolute maximum capacity at a job he might deeply hate or that is killing him just to stay out of a cage.
It effectively removes his basic human agency to choose his own life path. Given that catastrophic level of risk, Riker proposes something he calls a sexual credit report. This is part of his due diligence as heresy chapter. He essentially says men should rigorously vet women the exact same way they would vet a company before a merger.
He argues that because the legal liability is so astronomically high, because you can literally lose your physical freedom, your home, and your future assets, the due diligence before signing the contract must be absolutely ruthless. He suggests that before even considering marriage, a man should demand a full prospectus.
What goes into that prospectus?
He wants men to know the end count, which is the number of past sexual partners. He wants the exact debt-to-income ratio, the credit score, and full disclosure of any abortion history.
And his logic is that these are predictive risk factors.
Yes. He cites sociological data linking high partner counts to significantly higher baseline divorce rates. He argues that if you would never invest your life savings in a tech startup without aggressively auditing their books, you absolutely should not invest your entire life in legal freedom in a partner without knowing the complete historical data.
He acknowledges this is going to make people angry.
He knows this is considered deeply misogynistic or highly controlling by modern societal standards. That's exactly why he titled the chapter Heresy, but he says the only alternative is flying completely blind into a mountain. He says men must actively suppress their biological urge to play the hero or to save women or to ignore glaring red flags just because they're in love.
He also talks at length about the restraining order trap. The specific example of the text message trap was chilling to read.
That was the case study of David, a highly successful software engineer, zero criminal record, never been violent. His wife suddenly decided she wanted a divorce, and she wanted exclusive use of their expensive house. She went to the court and claimed she felt a threatening vibe from him.
A vibe. And her actual evidence was what?
Her only piece of evidence was a single text message from him that literally just said, "We need to talk."
Just, we need to talk. No cursing, no threats, no history of violence.
That was it. And based entirely on the precautionary principle, the judicial idea of better safe than sorry, the judge immediately granted the restraining order. David was forcibly evicted from his own home by armed police, instantly separated from his children, and then forced to pay massive legal fees just to defend himself against a fabricated threat.
Unbelievable.
Riker uses this specific case to illustrate that the cultural mantra of believe all women has completely replaced the foundational legal bedrock of innocent until proven guilty. The standard in family court is no longer objective evidence. It is entirely based on the woman's subjective feelings.
This leads perfectly into Section 5, the philosophical war.
Yeah.
Because Riker takes a step back from the law here and talks about the broad cultural shift from objective reality to subjective reality.
Yep.
Subjective harm versus objective harm.
This is really the philosophical core of his entire argument. It is what he frames as logos versus solipsism.
Let us break that down.
Sure. Objective harm is physical and measurable. Broken bones, actual theft of physical property, verifiable breach of contract. Subjective harm is entirely internal and unprovable. It is claims like, "You made me feel bad," or "I feel unsafe," even though you have not actually done anything threatening. Riker argues the modern courts have completely abandoned objective harm and shifted almost entirely to adjudicating subjective harm.
And he ties this shift directly to solipsism. Define how he uses that term in this context.
Solipsism, in a strict philosophical sense, is the idea that only one's own mind is sure to exist. But Riker repurposes it to describe what he calls the matriarchy's total inability to view reality outside of their own immediate emotional experience. From this worldview, if a woman feels oppressed, then she objectively is oppressed, regardless of what the actual facts or statistics say. If she feels unsafe, you are legally a threat, even if you are just sitting quietly on the couch reading a book.
It is the ultimate expression of feelings over facts.
Exactly. Riker explicitly calls this the anti-logos. Logos represents logic, reason, order, mathematics, the word. It is the foundational masculine principle that literally built Western civilization. Riker uses this great gravity metaphor. He says physics does not care at all about your gender studies degree.
Right. Gravity's undefeated.
If you step off a 10th story ledge, gravity is going to pull you down. If an engineering team ignores the harsh physical realities of bridge construction because those mathematical constraints feel oppressive to them, the bridge is going to collapse and people will die.
And his warning is that society is doing exactly that right now on a macro scale. We are actively ignoring the structural engineering realities of a functioning society, meaning the vital need for male productivity, the need for objective truth and law, in favor of protecting people's feelings. And he predicts a catastrophic collapse because of it.
He does. He stakes plainly that a society that rejects logos for solipsism will eventually face a massive reality corrective. The power grids will eventually fail. The supply chains will break down. You cannot run a complex, high-tech civilization on mere vibes and empathy. You desperately need cold competence. You need logos.
Also in this philosophical section, he takes time to diagnose the nice guy. And spoiler alert, it is not a compliment. I think a lot of guys listening probably identify as nice guys, thinking that is the morally correct way to act in relationships. Riker says, actually, if you are a nice guy, you are being highly manipulative.
He does not hold back here. He calls the nice guy a weak sociopath who is constantly attempting to enforce a covert contract. The nice guy operates on this hidden premise. If I do all the dishes, and I patiently listen to all her complaints, and I act as a perfect, non-threatening orbiter, she will eventually pay me out with sex and lifelong loyalty. But he never actually states this contract out loud.
It is entirely in his head. So when she inevitably does not pay up because she does not know about this contract or does not respect him, he gets incredibly resentful.
Right. Riker says this behavioral loop is pathetic and weak. It is attempting to trade submissive compliance for genuine affection, which biologically does not work. He heavily contrasts this nice guy archetype with what he calls the reality anchor.
The reality anchor.
Yes. He says a man's ultimate duty is not to be nice and compliant. His duty is to stand incredibly firm against chaos. He actually quotes the philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer here. And a quick warning to listeners, this is 19th century German philosophy that is incredibly harsh and completely offensive by any modern standard.
Yeah, let us be very clear here. Schopenhauer was not exactly a progressive feminist ally.
Definitely not. Schopenhauer broadly viewed women as inherently childish, frivolous, and dangerously short-sighted. Riker adapts this heavily criticized worldview to argue that the good father is so often destroyed in modern family court, specifically because his long-term vision His focus on strict discipline, financial savings, and stoicism directly conflicts with the mother's short-term emotional desires.
So the court always sides with the emotional, immediate gratification.
Yes. By siding with the subjective feelings, the court effectively removes the crucial reality anchor from the family unit. Riker's blunt advice is that men need to immediately stop trying to be nice guys and start aggressively being reality anchors, even if it guarantees they will be disliked or villainized.
Okay, so to recap where we are at, we have the legal trap of the iron contract, the massive economic drain of the tax donkey system, the legal nightmare of family court bounties, and the cultural rot of solipsism. It sounds incredibly hopeless, but Section 6 is titled The Way Out. Riker does not just complain, he actually offers a concrete blueprint. What exactly is the agency ultimatum?
The agency ultimatum is quite simple. Stop trying to save a system that wants you dead. Riker literally says, let the dead bury the dead. He tells men, do not be a foolish conservative desperately trying to conserve a burning building. Just walk away from the fire. He advocates for the ultimate power, which is the agency of refusal.
And this is where the concept of MGTOW comes into play. Men going their own way. I have seen this acronym pop up online in various forms. Riker describes them in the book as ascetic warrior monks.
He elevates the concepts significantly. He does not see them as just bitter guys hiding in basements. He sees them as the vital modern equivalent of the Christian monks during the Dark Ages, who painstakingly copied and preserved a classical knowledge while the Roman Empire burned around them.
That is powerful framing.
He argues these men are quietly preserving civilization's hard drive, meaning logic, stoicism, and independent productivity, by flatly refusing to participate in the corrupt, rigged marriage market. It is a targeted strike, it is a sex strike, and a marriage strike combined.
And a financial strike, too, because he talks about the sovereign individual. This directly connects to cryptocurrency and digital finance.
This is the highly practical side of his blueprint. He asks, how do you legally protect your hard-earned assets from the sprawling divorce industry? Riker points aggressively toward crypto and Bitcoin. His foundational argument here is that code is law.
Meaning math cannot be biased by a judge.
Exactly. A family court judge can easily freeze your traditional Bank of America account with a stroke of a pen. A judge can effortlessly garnish your corporate W-2 wages. But a judge absolutely cannot freeze a cryptographic private key if he does not possess the physical passphrase. It is mathematically impossible.
So eats the digital exodus, quietly moving your wealth into a digital realm where the rapacious state simply cannot reach it.
Right. And paired with that, he strongly suggests moving toward gig work and parallel economies. He tells men, do not be a standard W-2 corporate employee who is easily tracked, easily taxed, and easily garnished. Be an independent contractor. Be highly mobile. Flatly refuse to provide the financial liquidity for a system that actively hates you. Starve the beast by simply not feeding it your surplus labor.
He also talks about the necessity of building brand new parallel institutions from the ground up.
Yeah.
He mentions the Manosphere Academy. What is his vision there?
It is essentially a return to the classical trivium: grammar, logic, and rhetoric. The classical education model that used to be standard for all educated men. Riker argues that modern men desperately need to relearn how to critically think, how to construct a bulletproof argument, and most importantly, how to instantly spot logical fallacies so they can no longer be manipulated by societal shaming tactics.
Because right now they just get called a bad name and they fold.
Exactly. He says men have been deliberately educated by the state to be obedient employees and subservient taxpayers, not independent sovereigns.
And he also proposes fraternal orders of merit. He wants to essentially reimagine Freemasonry for the 21st century.
He calls them lodges of logic. He envisions these highly exclusive, private, male-only physical spaces where competent men can network, support each other financially, and build real economic power completely free from female or state interference. He calls this ultimate vision the New Jerusalem, a hypothetical society built exclusively by men, for men, based entirely on strict merit.
And the absolute most controversial part of that New Jerusalem vision, linking voting rights directly to tax contributions.
Yes, he calls it the suffrage of solvency. He argues that in this proposed New Jerusalem, you only get the privilege to vote if you are a verified net tax contributor. It is brutal arithmetic. If you feed the system with your labor, you get to drive the bus. If you feed off the system, you sit quietly in the back and you do not get to touch the steering wheel.
Wow. Okay, so that is the full, massive arc of the book. from the hidden trap of the initial marriage license all the way to the absolute exit strategy of becoming a sovereign individual.
It is a totally comprehensive, systematic dismantling of the entire modern status quo.
It really, really is. And look, whether you were listening to this and you agree with every single point Riker makes, or you think he is way out of bounds on some of it, you simply cannot deny the sheer force of the argument he has constructed here. He connects historical and legal dots that most mainstream commentators are utterly terrified to even look at.
And that is exactly the value of doing a deep dive like this. It forcefully makes you confront the actual underlying mechanics of the society you live in, rather than just accepting the polite fictions.
Absolutely. So let us wrap this up with a final thought to mull over. Riker says in the book, the house always wins until you simply refuse to play. That is the ultimate takeaway here. True power is the absolute refusal to be a victim. And, looking at history, there is actually a fascinating precedent for this kind of strike.
Oh, really?
Yeah, in ancient Rome, it was called the Secessio Plebis. When the common working men, the plebeians, realized the patrician ruling class was just using them as cannon fodder and tax donkeys, they didn't riot. They literally just walked out of the city and sat on a hill. They completely stopped working, stopped fighting, and the entire Roman economy ground to an absolute halt until the elites were forced to grant them real legal protections.
That is a perfect historical parallel to Riker's concept of MGTOW and the digital exodus. It is the ultimate flex of leverage, withdrawing your participation entirely. And that refusal, that leverage, it all starts with cold, hard knowledge. It starts with actually reading and understanding the contract before you ever pick up the pen to sign it.
Exactly. Listeners, if you are hearing this, you are the reinforcements in this ongoing intellectual war. If you want the full manual, the complex charts, the unredacted data, the highly specific legal breakdowns we just couldn't fit into this hour, you need to buy Uninsurable Marriage by Conrad Riker. Check it out right now on Amazon Kindle or Google Playbooks. Honestly, it pays for itself 1,000 times over if it saves you from even one single day sitting in a divorce court.
I highly recommend reading the source text directly. And do not forget to subscribe to his Substack at Conrad Riker for his daily analysis and the ongoing discussion around these ideas.
That is going to do it for us today. Please remember to like, subscribe, and leave a 5-star review on whatever platform you are using to help us disrupt the algorithm. Your engagement is what helps other men find the exit doors from the Matrix. Stay sharp out there, and we will see you on the next deep dive.